Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. For today's case, we have the case of Jade Green versus Jack Howser and Angela Howser. In this case, the Howsers, who were parents to Miss Green, objected to the person that their daughter married. They objected to the degree that they formed a criminal conspiracy in order to take their child away from their daughter by extortion, blackmail, and by engaging the police in an illegal illegal seizing of the child for illegal custody purposes. So this involves bad state action, bad parent action, and one hell of a family dispute. So we're going to read this dispute and we're going to see what happened in this epic tale of families gone wrong. Tolstoy said that every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way, and that observation rings true here. When Jack and Angela Howser decided that Angela's estranged daughter, Jade Green, was failing to provide a suitable home for Jade's daughter, E.W., they enlisted the local police, the sheriff's officer, the county prosecutor, and a private investigator to help them wrest custody of E.W. from Jade. Together, the group agreed that they would arrest Jade, while Jade's husband was out of the house so the Howsers could take the child. So after midnight one Sunday night, a caravan that included the sheriff, a sheriff's deputy, the Howsers, and the Howsers' private investigator set out to Jade's home to arrest her for writing Angela a $200 check that had bounced. Once Jade was in handcuffs, an officer gave Jack the all clear to come inside. The sheriff did not allow Jade to designate a custodian for E.W. or to obtain her consent to giving the E.W. to Howsers. Instead, over Jade's protest, the sheriff let Jack carry her daughter away. So that is one heck of a tale of parents who were displeased with their child's choices, displeased to the point that they enlisted the help of a private investigator and the sheriff's authority to arrest their own daughter over a $200 bad check, which, as we're going to learn from the facts, was known to be bad, and they did this only as a pretext. So just all kinds of fun. Jade sued the Howsers under 42 U.S.C. for conspiring with state officials to violate due process. A jury returned a verdict in her favor, and the Howsers ask us to overturn it. They contend there's insufficient evidence to support the verdict, and that it is contaminated by an evidentiary error in any event. They also find fault with several aspects of the damages award. We reject all these arguments. If you're going to steal someone's child, you're probably going to pay for it. Before 2014, Jade Green lived with her 4-year-old daughter in a house owned by her mother, Angela Howser, and her mother's husband, Jack Howser. At least in 2014, mother, stepfather, and child were all in the house together with Jade. And it seems like things were going fine in 2014. What changed? By the time Jade married Josh Green in May 2014, however, her relationship with the Howsers had soured. The Howsers made no bones about telling Jade they thought Josh was bad news. Nor did they hesitate to inform her that they had serious doubts about her fitness as a mother. Given their options, the Howsers were predictably upset when they learned Jade planned to move with Josh and E.W. to a new home. The Howsers, however, did more than express disappointment or try to persuade Jade to stay. They blackmailed her with nude photographs. If Jade took E.W., the Howsers threatened they would publish the photographs in the newspaper as well as mail them to Josh's workplace. That's just all kinds of special. This may be the first issue of revenge porn I've ever seen where the person who's eliciting the photos are the person's own parents. This is a strange issue of revenge porn, but that's where we are. But if the nude photos weren't enough to drive him away, they warned Jade they were willing to take another step. They would fire Jade from her job at the newspaper, and once she was unemployed, Josh would surely leave her. Threatening economically too. That's just all kinds of special here. When Jade moved in with Josh and E.W. anyway, the Howsers followed through on their threat to fire her. And since the blackmail had been a failure, they changed strategies. They decided to go directly for the child, E.W. They hired a private investigator, a friend and former state police officer, to help them find a way to take EW away from Jade and Josh. They quickly formed a plan. After the Howers fired her, Jade closed a bank account from which she had written a $200 check to Angela. Knowing the account was closed, Angela tried to cash the check anyway. When it bounced, the Howsers had the ammunition they needed. Intense is one word for it, yes. Angela used the bounced check to file a complaint with the county prosecutor. The prosecutor then filed a felony information for the bounced check, which they knew to be bounced, and obtained a warrant for Jade's arrest on the grounds she had passed a bad check. Once the warrant issued, the Howsers began calling local law enforcement officers to encourage them to execute it. The Howsers organized a meeting at the courthouse with the county sheriff, the chief of police, and Howard's private investigator. At the meeting, the group decided that Jade's arrest would provide the perfect opportunity for the Howsers to take custody of EW. If they arrested Jade, the police would have to place the child in protective custody of someone else. And if the police arrested Jade when Josh was not at home, they could give the EW to the Howsers. We're enlisting the police in a child kidnapping conspiracy. That's just great. The group decided to execute the plan on the upcoming Sunday night, and they agreed to have someone drive by Josh's workplace before they made the arrest to make sure that he'd be working when the police arrived. You can't make this stuff up, guys. On the night of the arrest, the Howsers and the private investigator met the chief of police at the father's gun shop. I'm not sure that's particularly relevant that the father in this situation had a gun shop, but that is a bit of an interesting detail, so okay, noted. When the group proceeded to the police station to meet others, the police chief began to get cold feet. For starters, he couldn't find an active warrant for Jade's arrest in the department system. Instead of being entered with the interagency database, which was protocol, this warrant had been faxed directly from the county prosecutor's office, which was unusual. On top of this, two of the department's officers expressed concern that the planned arrest might not be above board. They showed the police chief the Illinois statute governing child custody after arrest. As the officers read the statute, it required either a parent's consent to the child's placement or the placement into the child's custody services. They also told the police chief about a rift between the Howsers and the Green. Neither one wanted to be involved with the arrest because, as one put it, they didn't want to break the law. After hearing that, the police chief backed out of executing the warrant. Well, that's a piece of good news. We do have some police who were behaving goodly. We have some police officers who said, hey, this seems to not be quite right. They actually read the relevant statute and said, hey, what they're contemplating doing is actually not legal, and this whole thing seems suspicious. Let's not execute this warrant. Police discretion used for good. But did that end the story? Of course not. If these police won't do it, let's find other police. Why not? Frustrated, Jack asked Angela to see if the sheriff would execute the warrant. Angela called the sheriff on personal cell phone, and he agreed to come to the police station. The group decided to stick with the plan to arrest Jade that night. During the discussion, the sheriff called the county prosecutor and put him on the speakerphone. The prosecutor advised the sheriff and the police chief to move forward and told the sheriff that if EW should be placed with the Howsers if no one but Jade was home. He justified the custody decision in part by telling the sheriff there were multiple orders of protection against Josh, though the sheriff noted there were no actual orders in the office's system. The prosecutor is in on the conspiracy, making false representations to the police. Just super great. The sheriff confirmed the prosecutor's directions with his dispatcher and told the group, we're a go. In the squad car on the way to Jade's house, the sheriff asked his deputy if he was okay with this. Anytime your boss, the police officer, is asking you if you're okay with this, the answer should probably be no. That's a head tip to the wise. After equivocating, the deputy replied that if things went south with the arrest, he would just throw the state's attorney under the bus. So one member of a conspiracy is contemplating backstabbing another member of the conspiracy. Another good reason not to engage in conspiracies, because they do tend to go wrong. Outstanding. The deputy knocked on the door. Jade answered, and the deputy advised her there was a warrant for her arrest. After she was handcuffed, a member of the party signaled to Jack, who had joined the group in Jade's kitchen. Jade became agitated when he saw Jack, calling him an effing asshole, and demanded he get away from her. Ignoring her protest, the officer allowed Jack to go upstairs, get EW, and carry her off. Jade, meanwhile, was taken to the police station for booking. Over an hour later, she posted bond and returned home with Josh. Distraught and frightened, one would think, Jade had no idea how to get EW back. She called the state police and the Department of Child and Family Services for help, but was unable to obtain any information. The morning after her arrest, Jade tried to meet with the prosecutor at the county courthouse, but she was arrested again before she could be made there. In addition to filing a report regarding Jade's bad check, which occasioned the first arrest, Angela had filed a separate complaint alleging that Jade had refused to return the memory card from her company-issued cell phone. That gave the sheriff a reason to take Jade into custody for misdemeanor theft, and Jade was again required to post bail. Again, with these parents just making up criminal charges. Man, they must really hate the person their daughter married. I mean, this is a whole new level of hate, man. The Howsers obtained guardianship of EW and orders of protection keeping both Jade and Josh away from EW. These orders were opening salvo in a custody battle that extended for months. After a lengthy legal proceeding and the third arrest of Jade at Angela's behalf, Jade finally regained child custody. After the custody litigation concluded in Jade's favor, she sued the Howsers, the sheriff, and the county prosecutor under 1983 for conspiracy to deprive her of due process. I think so, yes. The prosecutor and the sheriff settled, but the suit against the Howsers proceeded to a jury trial in which a magistrate judge presented. At the end of the trial, a judge awarded Jade $470,000 in compensatory damages and $500,000 in punitive damages for a total of $970,000. The magistrate judge denied both the Howsers' renewed motion for judgment as a matter of law and their motion for a new trial. The Court of Appeal deals with only the arguments the Howsers raised, that no reasonable jury could have found that Jade objected to EW's placement with the Howsers. I mean, you just know without me reading more. There's no way that can possibly be true. There's no way it could possibly be true that a jury couldn't reasonably find that Jade objected to this. And no reasonable jury could have found the Howsers had an agreement with law enforcement officers to take EW. In evaluating these arguments, we view the record in the light most favorable to Jade. We'll start with the Howsers' contention that no reasonable jury could have found that Jade objected to EW's placement. The Howsers point out that Jade admitted at trial that she never specifically told the arresting officers that she did not want EW to be placed with Jack. In their review, that concession compels the conclusion that Jack implicitly agreed to the sheriff's placement in Jack's custody. First of all, in contract law, and I would suggest in criminal law, silence is not acceptance. Just because you didn't say something doesn't mean that you're agreeing to it. Second of all, I would be in so much shock, I wouldn't have the wits to basically object anyway. So this whole argument is pretty stupid in my opinion. The jury heard testimony that Jade referred to Jack as that effing ass after he entered her house to take EW. I would think that that would qualify as that, yes, and protested to the arresting officers that she did not want to be anywhere near him. It also heard that the sheriff told Jade that EW had to go into protective custody with Jack, that he presented Jade with no alternatives, and that Jade never gave affirmative consent for EW to be placed in Jack's custody. I know, Zafel. Silence is not agreement. Amazing, right? Silence is not agreement. Yeah. Yeah. You have to actually agree, either by word or by action. Because, of course, in contract law, you can accept by action. You don't have to verbalize it. But there has to be some affirmative act on your part. Just standing there mute does not count. The Howsers also insist no reasonable jury could have found they had an agreement with law enforcement officials to forcibly gain custody of EW. They begin by complaining that Jade did not demonstrate that state officials stood to gain anything from the plan, but Jade does not have to prove there was something in it for the state actors. Yes, basic proposition of conspiracy. In order to have a conspiracy, you just need two people to have an agreement and some act in furtherance of the conspiracy. The fact that one member of the conspiracy has nothing to gain from the conspiracy is irrelevant. You can join a conspiracy, a criminal conspiracy, even if you have nothing to gain from it. I'm not sure why you would, but you can. And yes, you are liable for that conspiracy, even if you have nothing to gain. Maybe you're doing it as a favor to a friend. It's one heck of a favor. You're going to be liable for it, so take note. As the Howsers tell the tale, the jury knew nothing more than they had reported Jade to the authorities for bouncing a check and taking a memory card. The record, however, tells a different story. The jury heard testimony that the Howsers arranged numerous meetings with law enforcement officials, got the officials to agree to execute the warrant when Jade's husband wouldn't be home, called the sheriff on his personal cell phone to ensure the arrest and transfer of custody went forward, rode in the law enforcement caravan on the night of the arrest. Nice touch there, being part of the caravan. That's just like, wow, you wanted to be there at the moment of truth. That's just great. Waited for an officer to signal that Jack could enter Jade's home and took EW with the sheriff's approval. That is more than enough evidence to support the jury's finding that the Howsers conspired with law enforcement officials. Yeah, they had me basically they were part of the same caravan. That's kind of the point where I'm like, yeah, they probably had an agreement. They're part of the caravan. That doesn't happen just randomly. They're part of the caravan, and the caravan itself is an overt act. So kind of done here at that point. Yeah. I mean, even Jerry Springer does not have cases this interesting. This is more than Jerry does. This is like, wow. Before the trial, the magistrate judge granted Jade's motion to exclude any reference to her criminal history, any suggestion she neglected EW, any suggestion Josh Green was dangerous, any evidence that either the Greens ever injured EW, and any evidence of living conditions in Green's home. The Howsers want to introduce such evidence to give the jury an understanding of why they sought custody, but the judge noted that the evidence had little probative value on their liability because plaintiff's bad behavior is not a defense to violating her rights. Right, so the defendants wanted to provide essentially motive evidence of why they did this. They wanted to say, here's all the reasons we did it, and isn't it really good that we did it because of these really good reasons? But motive is ultimately legally irrelevant. The question for the jury is a factual question. Did they do the facts of the crime? Did they perform each and every element beyond a reasonable doubt? Now, motive may help to elucidate the intent, but strictly speaking, intent is separate from motive. So here the judge said, look, all this motive evidence is just trying to basically exonerate you. You're essentially trying to get jury nullification through the back door, and you can't do that. We know the issue. The only issue is, did you perform the acts? That's for the jury to decide. Your reasons are ultimately legally irrelevant. That's true here. And so they said, look, you can't bring in this motive evidence because it doesn't legally matter. The only issue is, did you do it or not? So your reasons for doing it are not important. That's a legally correct statement. I agree with the judge here. The Howsers maintain the magistrate judge was wrong to exclude this evidence because without it, the jury lacked a full picture of why they thought their actions were justified. And that's about all the Howsers say. Their position is more of an assertion than an argument. Having been given no reason to question the evidentiary ruling, we won't. Finally, the Howsers contend the damage award is excessive. Really? That doesn't seem that excessive to me. The Howsers challenge each component of the damage award. We will start with the $350,000 the jury awarded Jade for mental and emotional pain and loss of companionship. The Howsers' argument that this amount is irrational boils down to this. This should be good, right? Jade couldn't have been that upset because she didn't seek medical treatment and didn't try hard enough to contact EW during their period of separation. That's blaming the victim on levels that are, wow, it's just amazing. Wow. I can't believe you actually argued that with a straight face, but okay, carrying on. But the jury was free to reach a different conclusion about the toll these events took on Jade. Over her objection, the county sheriff placed her daughter in the custody of people who had recently blackmailed her with nude photos, tried to break up her marriage, vindictively fired her from her job, and conspired with law enforcement officers to forcibly take her child. I think a reasonable jury could take notice of that and think that some sort of compensation is due. Yes. Jade was separated from her daughter and underwent the strain of a lengthy custody battle with people who had violated her rights by taking EW in the first place. The award is rationally related to the evidence, and the Howsers don't try to argue it's excessive compared to other cases. The compensatory damages also include attorney's fees from custody litigation caused by Howsers' actions. Jade testified her attorney's fees totaled $250,000. The jury valued them at $120,000. The Howard's challenge to this amount is frankly hard to follow. Their jumbled description of the state court custody litigation is nowhere close to a sufficient explanation of why the costs incurred were not rationally attributable to their actions, nor did they introduce any other evidence the fees were excessive. They have therefore given us no reason to second-guess the jury's valuation. In an action under 1983, a jury may be proceeded to assess punitive damages. They do, however, protest the amount the jury awarded. According to the Howsers, each one of the $250,000 of punitive damages is grossly excessive. Evaluation of the reprehensibility of the defendant's conduct requires us to consider whether the harm was caused by physical as opposed to economic damages, the tortious conduct evinced an indifference or reckless disregard of the health or safety of others, the target of the conduct had financial vulnerability, the conduct involved repeated actions or was an isolated incident, and the harm was the result of intentional malice, trickery, or deceit, or a mere accident. These factors indicate that both the Howsers engaged in reprehensible conduct. Their conspiracy with law enforcement to forcibly take EW was intentional, manipulative, and deceitful. And although they did not physically hurt Jade, their behavior reflected a total indifference to her mental and emotional health, not to mention her federally protected rights. The Howsers' conduct was reprehensible enough to warrant sanction, and the judgment is affirmed. So that is the case of Jade Green and Jack Howser and Angela Howser. In this case, we learned about a family situation gone wrong that Jerry Springer himself is probably jealous. We learned that Jack Howser and Angela Howser disagreed about who Jade married, disagreed to the point that they threatened their own daughter with blackmailing with nude photos, got her fired from her job, and then engaged in a criminal conspiracy with the police in order to take her child from her. So that is just all kinds of special. So that is the end of this case. She gets some money as compensation, and we learn that there are truly some horrible, horrible people in this world. So we'll hope that Jade Green has a good life and probably should stay away from her parents after this point. So that is the end of this story.